Welcome back everybody, I'm Carter Sandvin and this is the channel for Sandbox Illustration. Today I had a very cool idea in mind for a discussion in terms of the art that I've created in the past. I have this folder right here, as you can see, called Junkpile. Now, my Junkpile is actually some art that I've attempted in the past, like I've started on it, but I never finished it because I just wasn't a big fan of how it was going, where it was going. Maybe I didn't like the concept. Maybe my skill just wasn't there at the moment. Maybe I just was kind of having an off day, so that specific piece just wasn't looking right, so I just started over. Now, of course, for how much art I create, this folder isn't as full as I would like it to be, because unfortunately I had a very bad habit growing up of throwing out a lot of old art, whether it be unfinished art or finished art. Because at the time, I was thinking of it more along the lines of I would finish a piece, right? Or I would start a piece, and then I'd think, you know what, I can do better. So I would completely start over, and by completely starting over, I would throw away the old art, and sometimes I wouldn't even finish that art later on. But as a result of all this, of me having the mindset of my art can be better, I'm gonna do better, I would throw out what was there previously. And I've mentioned this in a video before, I believe at one point. I wrote a comic that I completely threw away. Now, it was bad. It was not a good comic. By today's standards, it was really bad. But I completely threw it away, and that really makes me sad. Two reasons. Because one, I'm just a very nostalgic guy. I love to see what I've done in the past, even if I'm not necessarily proud of it. And also, I want to keep a good precedent for creating art, which is, art is not about being the best, or necessarily even doing your best. It's about trying your best. You're gonna mess up, you're gonna have to throw out some pieces, you're gonna have to start over. That is more than okay. If you don't like how your art is right now, then that's fine. You don't have to ignore that feeling, but instead of either giving up or throwing out whatever you've had, then take it as a learning experience and like ask yourself, you know, what don't you like? Do you not like how you did the body structure? Say you're drawing characters. Do you not like the anatomy of the character? Do you not like the finish of it when it comes to like color and ink, stuff like that? Do you not like the overall style of your bodies? What is it, you know? Always try and figure out what's wrong with it so then you can improve later on. But that doesn't mean that you have to throw that old art away. That doesn't mean that you have to completely forget about that. In fact, Jazza actually coined that saying, and it's always stuck with me near and dear to my heart. Is that how you say it? I don't believe so. It's always been very important to me, that saying of, art is not about being the best, it's about trying your best. And another one that he's also said in the past is, or maybe it wasn't Jazza that said this, some artist, I've heard this from, said for every art piece that you see released to the public by an artist, there are 100 scraps of that art piece that they're not making public, you know what I mean? So for every artwork that you see, there are 100 rough drafts beforehand that they didn't continue with, you know? And that's a really important thing to keep in mind. I've noticed this personally because I would notice some really sad moments whenever people were looking at my art personally, and then it'd be like, man, I can never do that, or like, man, I can't do what he's doing. And to be fair, it is something that I've been doing my entire life. I've been working at it for almost 2 decades, and I'm not saying that it's just a skill that you can pick up overnight. But I also don't want that to discourage anybody that wants to get into the art realm. Because when they see that piece that I've just made, they don't see the entire process leading up to that. They don't see all the mess ups that I've done. They don't see where I have personally screwed up at making those pieces. And they also don't see the pieces that I myself didn't think were good enough to continue with. And that is exactly what this folder is. I started recently saving all of the sketches that I'm just not happy with, you know? Because while I may not make them official pieces anywhere, I still want them to be around to do a couple of things. For one, it makes the entire journey of my art completely transparent. You see every single step that I've taken, or at least as many steps as possible that I've taken to get to this point. That is also why I like to do the Let's Draws on my channel. I don't just want to show you guys an art piece. I want to show you guys where I'm going with the art piece, how I'm creating it, my own process. That's also why I like to talk over them, to show you guys what I am thinking while I'm exercising. And I am hoping that if there is anybody out there that is an upcoming artist, that seeing this is gonna give them some semblance of hope. You may have your own junk pile sitting over in the corner where you have a bunch of unfinished art pieces that you don't think are good enough to continue with, and that's okay. Let those sit there, but don't let it stop you from going forward with everything. I'm gonna stop talking for now. We're just gonna get right into the junk pile. Actually, before that, I do want to make a note. Once we are done with this, I also want to get into this journal right here. Obviously, it's a journal. You can see it says journal right there. That journal right there. And in fact, some other documents that I have down here cover a whole other section of not art, but story writing that I also kind of have a junk pile of. And I'll explain more about that once we actually get into it. But for now, let's get right into the junk pile. So I'm just going to be talking through all of these once I get to them, explaining what they were for, why I wanted to make them, why I decided that they weren't good enough, and we'll just go from there. So this first one here is actually not a full sketch, but it's just a page actually from an old sketchbook of mine. If you guys remember back at my video discussing the comic books that I want to write, and there was love in there, Love at first was actually about me and Haley. It was going to be, I don't want to say fan fiction because it's about me. A retelling of history, let's say. Kind of putting us in the situation of what that comic is about. And this is a piece that I had for it. So like you've got the evolution of me growing up. And unfortunately, at my age, I still can't grow facial hair like that. But that's okay, we'll just move on. I don't want to get sad over that. Ooh, this one is really good. This right here, I want to make a note of. I don't know where the first one is. This is a two-parter, but this was actually back when I was making my first ever business card. This was the first design that I had for my business card. Again, at the time, my art was kind of growing. It was still developing. I wasn't great at recreating people in my style. I hadn't really mastered my style just yet, but this was going to be the back of the business card where it was going to say like, oh, like then Carter Sandvin with all of my info and then like contact stuff down there. Actually, my current business card, which I will put up on the screen right here, I kept the same format, of course, because I just thought it would be a clean way to show me, obviously, good way to represent my style as well, and then all of my information, and I've kept that pretty much. This was back in 2019, so I've kept that same idea for a business card for 3 years now. So that one is very cool, and again, it's not great, especially because at the time I wasn't really good with Copic markers yet. I'm still not great with them. I haven't really mastered them, but at the time it wasn't as good, so like you get the kind of blotchy blue in there. And coloring Copics on bigger surfaces is tough, you know, especially to try and get the entire thing even. But anyways, I digress. All of these right here, when I graduated from high school, I wanted to make some sketches for all of my teachers that I had, and I wanted to kind of leave them as a little goodbye gift for everybody. These are actually still pretty good sketches. In fact, this right here, this looks like something that I would draw today with my style. Like, these are very stylized. I'm actually really impressed. It'd be kind of awkward now to do it because not only am I not in high school, but I'm not even in that state anymore. No, these look really good. I'm actually very happy with those. I think the reason that I didn't finish these was just, I'll get into it. I'll get into all this. The reason that I didn't finish these was I had a big period there for a while where I hadn't really come to a state where I wanted to mix my creative endeavors with discipline and routine and try to gain some self-control over it, I kind of came to this sort of unhealthy conclusion that stuff that required discipline and calculation and what have you, stuff like that, had no field in the creative realm. It had no space in the creative realm. And that's a really bad way to look at it. And in fact, I think that was one of my biggest issues with the Zeke channel, you know, is because with the Zeke channel, that channel was purely creative. Like, that was all just like my own voluntary stuff. It didn't have a bigger purpose behind it. Like, this one is for my art business, but Zeke was just me making videos I liked. And because of that, I didn't want to like commit myself at a disciplinary level, and that's unhealthy because I tried to convince myself that if it's a creative endeavor, it should just be its own thing. Like, it should just come naturally. But I've come to learn since then, discipline is vital when it comes to the creative arts. Any endeavor that you have in life that's like your own side passion, it has to have discipline in there. And so the biggest thing with this was I started it, but then I just never finished them, you know? And I just kind of got to a point of, I forgot about them, but that's okay. And it's a little disappointing, but I will look back on these and say that even though I didn't have the grit to finish them out, I am very happy with these. This one right here is very cool. So again, this was at a point where my style was not the greatest, but this is actually, it's very hard to see because the penciling is so faint. If you can kind of get an idea of those figures right there on the paper. This is for an apocalypse story that I had. And in fact, I will be getting into that apocalypse story once we cover the journal. Obviously, there's like a time jump that happens in the apocalypse. So you have the main characters and they get older and their looks change, hair grows out, stuff like that. That's very cool. In fact, this one was interesting. I can't remember what I called this comic. The characters were their own people, like they were written as their own people, but the visuals were all based off of people I know. In fact, I think I made myself the villain, which is really cool. I was at a point here where my art was really becoming something in terms of my skill, you know? I was really starting to figure out how bodies worked and how anatomy worked and what have you. So, while it's not the cleanest sketch of a body, I'm pretty proud of it. Yeah, right here. This is actually for Love, too, actually. Again, it's really hard to see the faces there. That's the main character, the guy that was presumed dead, and so he's like on this big journey to try and get back to his fiance, the love of his life. He's got nice hair. I don't know why this has like food on it or something. Understandable. This sketch right here, actually, if you guys remember Isaac from the Basement Dweller sketches, he wanted me to do some commissions for his football team. Now, unfortunately, again, going back to the discipline thing, I never finished this one. His friend put in a commission for this, and I didn't finish, which sucks. You know, I always felt bad about that. The anatomy does not make sense. Like, that arm looks really weird. Yeah, it was just him, like, putting up a finger as he was walking down the field. And again, I didn't know much about anatomy at the time. I really just copied bodies when I was drawing realistic bodies. This sketch right here is supposed to be me and Haley. I never finished Haley's side, but I finished mine. I'm just gonna let you guys know now, like, right now, granted, I'm pretty young. Like, I'm only, like, 20, 21, but I can only grow, like, a faint mustache and a little shaggy beard. I wish I could grow facial hair like that, but fortunately, I don't think I will, so I guess we'll move on. I can't get sad about my facial hair right now. I'm gonna point this out now. I wasn't great at drawing human heads for some reason. A big thing is I really made foreheads too small when I drew them. You know, like, this is a small forehead. The eyes are really big, which I guess that's not bad. Like, that's a stylistic choice, like right here. Like, I'm gonna put up a sketch right here on the screen, and that sketch right there, the foreheads are ridiculously small on the heads to the point where, like, it doesn't even look like a natural, like, cranium up here. You know what I mean? So I had that problem for a while, but I'd like to think that I worked it out. This one right here, this character is actually named Gopher. It's getting really bright outside, so, you know, that's a lot better. Like, the light is a bit sharper on my face, but comes through a lot better. So going back to this, these are just character sketches for a character that's going to be in the comics. So again, I'll mention that a little bit more, excuse me, a little bit more once we get into the journal. But I suffice, am I using that correctly? I digress. That's right. Ooh, this is the original Old Cat. I made this sketch based off of my cat Gunther called Old Cat, and it was going so well until I was going to color in the scar on his eyeball, and my Copic bled, and it completely just drowned it. Like, this piece was finished, like finished, and that happened, and now I'm really sad. I'm gonna do a video reviewing all of my Copic pieces. I recreated it, and I believe I have it in that, it's like a white binder up on my bookshelf. I believe I have the renewed piece on there, but this was the original. I think it looks pretty cool, but oh, that sucks how that went down. One thing that I really like about this is it's supposed to be like a plush mouse, like it's obviously like a pink mouse, but it's still got blood around it, just to show like a vengeful cat. Oh yeah, I'm really happy with this piece. Again, when it comes to the Copics, just a little bit on the amateur side, which I can't be too hard on myself. I'd only had them for a month or two at this point, but really happy with that one. And see, going back to the whole idea of like, it's just pieces that I didn't finish, didn't continue with, because this right here is actually plans for like a giant sketch. In fact, this was sort of akin to the one of all my teachers. This was going to be one of a bunch of schoolmates of mine that I felt like I had a pretty close friendship with, and it was going to be a giant collage of all of us. I still would like to do a piece that's just like a bunch of characters like crammed together onto the picture to where you can just look anywhere and you see a character. I'm not sure what I would do yet with that, but for now this is right here, and yeah, I do plan on doing something to this style at least in the future. This one right here, this definitely is a piece that I want to redo in the future. In fact, I'm not sure why I didn't finish this, but it's actually a piece of me and Haley fighting this like giant monster or whatever. This one I really want to try and play with depth. This was back when I was kind of learning the fundamentals, but not at like a deep education level, more just like, what are the little tricks that I can learn to like help me right now, you know? Instead of actually learning about depth, I was like, hey, how do I draw a tree coming towards me? Or like, how do I draw something far on the ground, you know? So that was kind of the problem there. I mentioned this in my art journey video. You know, back when I was working on the original arch piece, I went back to learn the fundamentals, but not at a level that was an actual education on the fundamentals. It was more just like, I need to figure out how to make this piece. How do I do that? You know what I mean? And this was another one of those. Then, right here, if we get to these last few pieces, I have all these little like figures or icons because on my Zeke channel, I had a podcast series called Chatterbox, and on that one, I always had like little figures of either my guests or whoever was like the topic or the subject, you know? And then, so like you've got ones here discussing like different concepts of mine, things like that. This one right here, same thing. And then I was gonna have a video discussing some people that I looked up to, which is kind of awkward because there's only like one guy on this page now that I still respect. But we'll move on. If you guys can figure out who those are, here, I'm gonna try and make it really clear for you. If you guys can figure out who those are, and then let's just say I'm only really a fan of this one, but if you can figure out who all those are, then that'll be a fun game, I guess, to see. Here we go. Oh, we're here. This is the last of the junk pile. This right here, this sketch, which is, it's actually kind of incredible. None of this would be going on right now. This channel, my current art setup, my current art knowledge, none of that would be happening right now if it weren't for this one sketch. This sketch, I hated it because I loved it, you know? Or not because I loved it. I hated it in spite of the fact that I did love it, you know? Like, it was so close to being something that I knew could be incredible, but something about it just screamed to me like, it's just not there yet. Do you know what I mean? It just wasn't there yet. And so that's when I was like, I need to figure out my style. And then I was like, hey, figure out my style, I'll just look up some YouTubers and see what they say. Then they're like, oh, well, you gotta go back and learn the fundamentals. And I'm like, what are the fundamentals? And then that was when I was like, I gotta go back to school. I kind of learned how to properly make art. And I think that's pretty incredible. That's beautiful. What a beautiful ending to this. If you're ever looking at your junk pile, right? If you're ever looking at the art that you don't like, there is always something in it that can bring you some value of knowledge and education and growth. If I didn't decide to make this piece, none of this would be happening. So like every single piece that you say I don't like, find what it is in there and please just learn from it. It's hard. It's not the easiest thing to look at a piece and try and figure out why you don't like it, because there could be multiple things, or it could be something that you don't even directly notice, you know what I mean? Like, it could be something as vague and as, like, hidden as, oh, you drew the head wrong back when you were doing the construction, so that looks funky. And so, like, oh, you gotta start over there. Or like, oh, you drew his eyeballs wrong. And this sounds like I'm ranting, but my point is, it's not entirely easy to figure out why you don't like what you're making. But if you really just take the time, first off, take the pressure off yourself. Whether that be pressure of time, self-critic's pressure, just breathe for a second and just be like, okay, take a step back, maybe get a glass of water if you even needed to, and just say like, okay, what don't I like about this? Like, what's going on here? Let's try and break this down in a calm, calculated manner to really try and dig into what is wrong here. And I think that that is one of the beauties of having a junk pile, is that inside every messed up piece of artwork is a little nugget that you can take with you, put in your pocket, and carry on to the next sketch. And I think that is an extremely beautiful way to end this video. So thank you guys so much for watching. This was Carter Sandvin with Sandbox Illustration. Make sure to check in the description for links to more of my content. Then like the video, comment on it, and subscribe for weekly art-related videos. Anyways, have fun, dudes.